Well, thank you very much and a good evening to the viewers. What I can say is that, of course, our campaign, in terms of our grand objective of reaching out to the people, has been largely successful in terms of being able to campaign and to speak out to the people even when we've been facing all these challenges. The regime, of course, is deliberately trying to make sure our message does not reach people. That's why you see all these blockades and the frustrations we've gotten in many places. But you get to see that people are on social media following. Today I've been moving around Kampala, and there are many people actually who, station phones, screens, and keep following wherever our president goes and try to continue following the message. It's very unfortunate what Ofona Opondo is saying, because he knows clearly that all these things that are happening are choreographed. They are part of a clear partisan system designed against the opposition and trying to favor Mr. Museveni and their criminal enterprise. Because if you see, he's saying that we started out well the first month. What has changed? Because that first month they're talking about...
That's what he's asking as well.
Yes, the first month they were not blocking us. We were able to move around, go to these places, reach out to the people. Because you see, when we have these meetings with the police, with the Electoral Commission, they talk about processions. You in the media have seen wherever Museveni is going, your candidate Museveni is going. You see processions by NRM. When we were there the other day, the police were saying that, for NRM, they reach out to us and we guide them on processions. We ask them, why is that right not available to NUP? How come when we come, the first thing the police says, processions are not allowed? For NRM, they say, for NRM, we regulate their activities. So it's clearly partisan. They keep saying that we are not allowed to have our rallies in the middle of towns, wherever there are towns, there are busy town centers. But you see where they have held their rallies. Today there was that letter from a court in Masindi saying that because General Museveni was there yesterday, court would not conduct any business because he was at Boma Grounds, which is in the city center. You ask yourself, if NUP wanted to use the same venue for its rally, can it be allowed? The police will clearly say no, and they will take you so many kilometers away from town, they don't want you to go there. I'll give an example of today. Today our president was in Lumbuye, and you saw, of course they took our rally to a farther place than initially what we wanted to have. But our people were there peacefully, in their thousands, received the president, and you did not hear that anybody has been killed, anybody has been shot, anyone has been maimed. Our people are very, very peaceful. It is only when the police and military come in and start beating up people and doing all these things, committing crimes against us, that you see all this mayhem. So we should call it what it is. It's just partisanship.
There is every indicator that the campaign is now building up into another chaotic affair. Does it in a way give signals of what lies ahead?
Of course, like I said, that's what, you need to understand the objective. The NRM in its, formation and the whole idea is about violence. They are a violent entity. And in order for them to, for example, be violent on election day, they must create conditions that will lead to that violence. You know how elections are conducted. Everybody saw what happened in Kawempe and the way they were, unleashing a lot of brute force on citizens and all that. So what we saw in Gulu, what we saw in Woya, what we've been seeing on this campaign trail in Barara and other places is intended to, first of all, instill fear in the public, intimidate the people of Uganda, and of course suppress voter turnout, because they know that if people turn out in their numbers to vote, they stand no chance.
Thank you. At this moment, I will engage General Mugisha Muntu, one of the presidential candidates who is on the campaign trail down south. Good to have you, General. And how would you, yes, he's in Jinja, apologies. How would you gauge the mood and the dynamics that are playing out just a few weeks to Jan 15th?
Yeah, good evening, dear viewers. Thank you for enabling me to participate in the discussion around the issue of rallies and the whole campaign process. The issue that is being discussed I believe once you look at it from the question of how to shape public perceptions, then we would get a clear understanding of what is going on. The regime normally has a belief that if there is a candidate who attracts crowds, that the best way of shaping public opinion is to contain the crowd. And of course, they use methods of deploying the security services to disperse the crowds. A number of times when there are escalation of situations, the use of tear gas to contain the crowds from building up. Because the main fear of the regime is the magnitude of the people that compose those crowds. The fear is the psychological effect of crowds in terms of how people perceive a candidate. Normally, many of the people look at crowds as an indicator of popularity of a candidate. This has nothing to do with any particular candidate. In actual fact, it is not necessarily about Honorable Robert Chagulanyi. Because if you look back in 2006, in 2011, in 2016, the same tactics were being deployed against Dr. Chiza when he was our candidate in FDC. Because even then, Dr. Chiza used to attract crowds. I remember the first time in 2006, when we started the campaign, when we moved from West Nile, and the crowds in Arua, and then down in Masindi, and then Hoima, they kept on increasing in numbers. At that time, there was no interference. Until after Kunji, actually that's when he was arrested at Musega. So, since that time, one can clearly understand that the regime fears the building of momentum. Because if a candidate attracts crowds and there is no interference, therefore people will lose fear. And yet fear is used as a tool of control to limit or shape the perceptions of the public around the candidate. So if they intervene and throw tear gas and brutalize people, that creates fear and therefore limits the numbers of people who want to take risk to continue being attracted to a candidate who pulls those kinds of crowds. And therefore, as long as the regime fears crowds, the methods which are being used are going to continue. If there is change of heart on the side of the regime, and they get ready, and they ready themselves to go through a free, fair, transparent electoral process, and therefore not caring who pulls crowds, then we'll see cessation of those kinds of interventions that we have noticed so far. One thing I'm absolutely sure of, because people keep focusing on individuals. Okay. I can tell you, if any of the 7 candidates was full crowd, or 2, or even 3 of them, of a similar nature, the same interventions would be done. So it has got nothing to do with a particular candidate. It has to do with the fear of the regime around crowd. Until that is resolved, and a change in the manner in which
the role of security is dominating the conversation around the forthcoming election and nothing else. No one is talking about the register. No one is talking about the biometric voting system and technology plus other factors. I hope you can hear me. I'm asking whether you don't find it strange that security is topping the conversation around the forthcoming election and nothing else like biometrics and the register and other significant issues.
We've had agents, each candidate, all the 8 have got agents. They are holding regular meetings at the Electoral Commission. There are quite a number of issues which are being raised. I believe there was a discussion last week or the beginning of this week. I've not got feedback yet from our headquarters, from our agent. But one of the critical issues was the late release of the electoral register. We're also asking the Electoral Commission to rectify the statement which was given by the Electoral Commission, indicating that the law requires people, once they have voted, to go back home. The law talks about, I think, 20 meters from the cordoned off area. Once one votes and they are able to stay 20 meters away from the cordoned off area. That's what the law says. So I don't know what the outcomes are in the meetings which were held, but the Electoral Commission needs to come out and rectify that, because everywhere we are going, we are being asked by the population what exactly the law says. I think it will be very unfortunate if the Electoral Commission doesn't come out and clarify. We need to follow the law. We should not follow dictates of anybody. The law is what we all need to follow. As to the electoral registers, I've also got, I don't have feedback yet on that as well.
Thank you. I'll definitely be getting back to you. Candidate Kasivante, you seem to be in sync on a number of issues with your colleagues with whom you're standing against President Museveni. How come you are not speaking in a single voice, or you're not coalescing around the critical issues that are distorting this campaign?
No, it doesn't. We don't need to merge so that we come up with a single voice. When I come here personally with my party and we talk, and you also talk, it means we shall manage this old man. Because now when you look at how police treats people, I don't know, because now for them they believe that they are intimidating voters. They think that they are intimidating us. And I don't think that is true, because they are only making us strong. Because I saw people in Chegegwa, they have started even moving with tomatoes. They know the role of tomatoes, that when you tear gas them, they will move with the tomatoes, they will move with the bottle of water, and you will not manage them. And I want to assure the security agencies that this, what you are doing, you cannot manage us if we make a decision. If we decide, because for instance, when I was in Chitigum, the TPC tried to attack me together with my supporters. And I said, no, I'm supposed to be there, and I'm going there. And my supporters together with me, we managed to I managed to have a rally.
So is your campaign running on defiance as well?
Because if you mistreat me, I'm telling you this is what I'm supposed to do, and you are saying no. That is because police have no authority to stop me from making a rally from where I'm supposed to do it. Because I got permission from the Electoral Commission. We have got a clear program for as candidates.
Thank you. Where things stand, you would ordinarily say, but that come 15th, more than 21 million.
You see, Simon, you're part of the media. Unfortunately, the media in Uganda is gullible. I've been part of it, as you know, so I have a deeper knowledge of the media in Uganda. I have also been in politics for direct politics the last 35 years or so. So I also have a deeper understanding of the politics. Again, that's the hyperbole. You see, even in the statement being attributed to the chairperson of the Electoral Commission is picked out of context, and because it makes opposition narrative sell. They will say the chairperson doesn't want us at the polling station once we have cast our votes. I don't think that chairperson is a stupid man, let alone being a lawyer, that he can make directives on things that are glaringly in the law, but also if he did so, would be glaringly outside the law, and he knows he would be challenged. I'm glad he has since amplified his explanation, and you remember we were here with his spokesperson, Muchunguzi. Today I was speaking to Mr. Moses Byaruhanga, who is our candidate representative at the Electoral Commission. And indeed said they have been having series of meetings of the agents of presidential candidates. And so I want to respond to you that some of the things they discuss and resolve may not find their way into the media, but there are a number of things being discussed, those concerns you are raising, of biometric, of administrative issues, of the level of preparedness of the Electoral Commission vis-a-vis the other stakeholders. That discussion is going on. I don't think it should be that everything they have resolved should come into the media immediately. I think it is their judgment. If, for example, a candidate's agent complains and the explanation is satisfactory in a meeting, chances are that agent will go back to their candidate, to their party headquarters, and explain that our concerns, I have raised our concerns on A, B, C, D, and they have been responded to. Probably quite often the response would also be in writing, and that should suffice for the complaining party, in my view. Now, there's a big conversation actually going, at least from our side. When candidate Museveni and we, his various agents, go, we have been meeting people. Since I was last here, Simon, last Thursday, the following Friday, I drove to Eastern Uganda. I worked on Friday, I worked on Saturday. Sunday, we had a huge meeting that brought together close to 9,000 leaders of NRM in what we call Bukit sub-region. We met in Paris from 10 to 4 p.m. Our candidate, Yoweri Museveni, flew from Lira, where he had made, I'm told there, the sub-counties and the villages are more, because Lira has, Lango sub-region, has more districts than Bukedi. I'm told their number was 15,000. And who were we meeting? Who was he meeting in Lira? Who was he meeting together with us in Paris? We were meeting our NRM chairpersons of villages. 2, we were meeting our LC1 chairperson flag bearers. You remember, LC1s we elected, we gave them the flag sometime back in June.
I want to interrupt you just a bit.
Wait. We were meeting all the flag bearers. The media have chosen to pick on the police, to pick on the army, confrontation, and I want to repeat again with Mr. Robert Kyagulanyi, because there hasn't been many, as far as I know, confrontation between security and other presidential candidates.
And you being insensitive. And when you come out to say the opposition is running on hyperbole.
There has not been even many confrontation between NUP candidates, parliamentary, lower local government, as far as I know, in their respective areas with the security.
Just a second. When you call it hyperbole, I find it strange, because even the Electoral Commission has lately come out to condemn and call for an investigation.
But
the security themselves have promised to conduct an investigation. So you're being insensitive.
I am saying hyperbole because you are making it appear as if it is the dominant feature in the campaigns. Yes, there are infractions between candidates, and in this particular case, between Mr. Robert Kyagulanyi and police and the army. Don't make that be the dominant feature of the whole election. Yes, it is bad, it attracts the media, but it's not the dominant feature in this campaign.
What is dominant?
The dominant feature is that in the country, thousands of candidates are going about their campaigns peacefully in harmonization with the various stakeholders. However, we have one candidate who, for some reason, they themselves explain differently, I explain differently, the police explains differently, and I am saying, you remember the last submission I made, I said, when we started, when somebody said that they are going to have protest vote, did anybody in the media, did anybody in the political activism actually sit down to analyze, to break down what are the elements of this protest vote? Well, and that's why I was saying, what has changed? You need. I'll get back to you. I'll definitely get back to you. You now need to see, having gone 1 month, as my young brother here has admitted that 1 month went well. What changed? I think Mr. Kyagulanyi has discovered that there's a point at which he discovered that if he conducted this campaign the way he conducted the previous 1 month, probably is not going to attract attention, particularly media attention, and other attention from which he thinks will be the turning point.
Louis, for his how would you react to
what he's saying is ridiculous?
You're playing a sympathy card
and of course, but you know, it is expected from a person like him. Like I said, and I think General Muntu also put it in very good perspective. The reason why the Honorable Robert Kyagulanyi Ssentamu is being targeted, of course, is that he's a dominant candidate. He's giving them sleepless nights. He's a real challenge against General Museveni and his decadent system. That is why they have to go for him in that manner. The reason why in the first month, because there's nothing we changed in terms of our campaign. We just went out and met the people. Even then we had complaints, of course. It's not that the first month was seamless. There were some issues. And when we went to the Electoral Commission, we talked about them. You remember even from the very first month, they were diverting us from the main routes. Oforo Pondo is here. He knows that there is no other presidential candidate who is being shoved off the main roads. Asked, you know, sometimes our president is supposed to move like 10 minutes to a venue. And the police say you have to move 2 hours. They push him towards, you know, a road that leads him 2 hours to reach the venue. And then when he reaches the final rally, for example, you know, at maybe 10 minutes to 6 p.m., and he's still addressing the people, they start tear gassing the people and doing all these crazy things that they've been doing to our campaign. So what is very, very clear is that the regime is in panic mode. If Oforo Pondo wants us to explain to him what the protest vote, we've been very clear about the protest vote. It is simply about campaigning, kanonye. We've talked about voting massively, increasing the voter turnout, what we say kalonde. We've said people should protect their vote, which is within the law, which we say kakume in Uganda. And then we say, if the regime deliberately rigs this vote, kabanje, which is again within the law, we say use all lawful means to demand your victory if these people do what they've always been doing. And we've broken down the measures and means which the regime has been using to break the law.
Isn't that what is making security nervous and suspicious?
No, but what law have we broken? That's what I'm saying. You read Article 29 of our Constitution. It provides for people to peacefully protest unarmed. People must be able to come out and say no to whatever is going on. So our campaign, our aim is to really reach out to the people of Uganda, to sell to them our message of change, to give them hope for the future. And I can tell you that
an election, right?
The regime in itself knows very well that they're in panic mode. That's why they're doing this. You know, initially they were saying these people in opposition don't have issues. They don't talk about policy issues and all that. And if you see our rallies, especially in that time before they started unleashing this kind of violence, we would break down a manifesto to the people, tell them what we intend to do. We tell them what a new Uganda is all about. Go into the figures in terms of how much we lose through corruption, in terms of how much we lose through what we call negatory expenditure and all that, and telling the people of Uganda how we shall put their resources to where they are to improve their lives in terms of infrastructure, healthcare, education, and all these things. So they got scared because they saw that we are gaining a lot of momentum from the population. We do not need any sympathy, Simon. We do not need any sympathy. The people of Uganda are out there. All we want is, and you remember, people came and asked our president that, you know, the election is so quiet. He said, that's what we want. We want it to remain like that because our main aim is to reach out to the people.
I want to engage Honorable Norbert Mao, the Minister for Justice. Honorable Mao, good to have you and a very good evening. How do you contend with the fact that what you earlier predicted of a peaceful and quiet election has gone the opposite way?
Hello?
You can hear me. How regrettable or unfortunate is it that the campaigns that you predicted to be largely peaceful have turned chaotic, and in the run-up to the election, things are just getting worse?
Simon, do you hear me?
Very good evening. Thank you for joining us. How do you contend with the reality that your prediction of a quiet campaign has gone the opposite way?
The reason why I said that the election would be quiet is because I know all the actors, all of them. But compared to 2021, I don't think we have seen very bad things. Fortunately, we have laws. I know in this debate, your main focus perhaps is to find out who is to blame and point fingers. I do not know how you have mapped the actors. I don't know whether you have apportioned responsibility to each of the actors. But as far as I'm concerned, if you have a rally, you can get to your venue. And if there is a likelihood of having commotion en route to the venue, that is when the security forces, primarily the police, would be involved in ensuring that you reach your venue safely. After all, it is presumed that you have an important message. A campaign is not just a carnival. You can organize carnivals, you can organize parades, and those should be given the proper names. But you can imagine if those who go for prayers hold processions on each day that they hold prayers, I think we would be having chaos. So it's regrettable and unfortunate that we have had incidents of violence, and some of the violence has been attributed to those who are not part of law enforcement. For instance, rival political parties, like the incident in Gulu, like the incident in Chiruhura. Those are very unfortunate and they should be condemned. In fact, they are in breach of the Code of Conduct of Political Parties under the Political Parties and Organizations Act. And then for those officers, whether they be police or the military, who have involved themselves in violence, they are also not above the law. So I think what matters most is to name the problem, to give the problem a name, which is basically impunity. That's what we are talking about. And the answer to impunity is to restrain those who are responsible. Now, that restraint can come from the overall body that is in charge of elections, namely the Electoral Commission. It can also come from the organizations That is, the police has got the police standards unit, the UPDF has got their disciplinary procedures, and then the political parties, they have their mechanisms for disciplining their members who act in contempt of the law. Under the laws, there are actually sanctions, and those sanctions can be invoked by the National Consultative Forum of Political Parties. So I personally believe that we should invest more energy in tackling the individuals who are well known, and they should be held accountable.
We are 39 days away into 34 actually, 34 days away into the 15th January elections. How is the landscape building up to the big day? What do you see as the key things that are building up?
Now, we are getting closer to the elections. And the elections are not just about the candidates, by the way. The elections are not just about the political parties. As a matter of fact, despite the claims of membership, real active members of political parties in Uganda are a very small percentage of the population. All the more reason why the environment for persuading voters should be free and fair. All the more reason why we should not interfere with the right of candidates to persuade voters. The majority of Ugandans actually are independents. They may nominally claim to believe in a political party for one reason or another. But the truth is, the real active members of political parties are very, very, very few. Now, the environment is not just toxic during elections. So let us stop talking as if this climate of intolerance is only manifested during elections. Even before elections, there are many actors in political parties who take pride in the fact that they hold other leaders in contempt, that they hold other political parties in contempt. This is what I call the culture of political untouchability. We need to know that the election only heightens these tensions. So as we talk now, we just have to take a look at the law, and we have to ensure that we make it clear to everybody that no one is above the law. I believe very strongly that it is possible. It is a shame when we have this culture of total intolerance.
Honorable Norbert Mao, you earlier said a campaign is not a carnival. Who is running campaigns like carnivals?
If you want to organize a carnival, you should make it a carnival. And I think that can be arranged. During elections, there is no law which is suspended. When I talk to political parties, I tell them that the law that regulates public order is the Public Order Management Act. Now, I have been championing the regulations that should be put in place so that the discretion by the security forces is restrained. In the absence of regulations under the Public Order and Management Act, the police have virtually unlimited discretion on what is lawful and what is unlawful. So what matters most is for all the players to put their cards on the table. If you want to hold a procession, it is important that you are given the time when you want to hold a procession. and provision is made to secure both yourself and those who will be around as you hold your procession. What I think no country can accept is that anybody, whether they belong to a political party, whether in opposition or the ruling party, and no individual, whether they are civilian or in the armed forces, whether police or the army, no country should allow anybody to act as if they are above the law. That is the kind of climate that we should fight. But if we spit fire as political leaders, for instance, I heard the other day the leader of the NUP telling his supporters that they must now constitute themselves into a guerrilla army, that they must conduct themselves like guerrillas, and he proclaimed that they are now an army. I think those are things that can easily be misread by unsuspecting followers. Or when the security forces stigmatize an opposition party. I think an election is a competition for the minds of citizens. So if you treat an opposition party as if it is an outlaw organization, and yet it is registered, you have allowed it to nominate candidates, you even have schedules for them to campaign, then definitely it undermines the quality of the election. So as citizens, we must demand fair play. Unfortunately, the forums where we are supposed to discuss these things soberly are also being actively undermined. For instance, IPOD. It is in IPOD that political parties are supposed to sit and talk about these matters. And then, of course, we have the National Consultative Council for Political Parties. So if we don't have a clearing house where we can talk frankly to each other, that is when you end up with these street fights, because then there are no holds barred either way.
To General Mugisha Muntu. General, do you find a bit of reassurance with the statements from the Minister of Justice, where he doesn't even spare security forces for their overzealousness in one way or the other?
I haven't got your question. Please say it again.
Question, I didn't pick it well.
True. Do you find Honorable Mao reassuring when he talks of seeking a middle ground to resolve the current toxicity existing between security and supporters of National Interplatform, who have been the biggest victims in this case?
I didn't pick it still. I didn't pick the question still, unfortunately.
Take a very quick break, and when we return, I'll certainly engage General Muntu to share his perspective, plus my guests in the studio and Honorable Mao. Mr. Kasibante, you had quite a lot to share with us, but did you ever anticipate campaigns to be this murky?
No, I've never unexpected it. But, you know, I made a decision that I would not have time to argue with such people like Honorable Norbert Mao. You know, when someone talks comfortably because he's earning 80 million per month, he's talking comfortably that nothing has police done, what, because he earns 80 million per month. My mother here, I saw him fighting there looking for votes because he wants to earn 46 million. Yet we have peasants there in Mayuge, young boys who are working for 2,000 per day. We don't have a minimum wage here.
What does the president earn? Why are you fighting to be the president of Uganda?
Because I want to liberate the country. You see, but now when you look at people, arguing as if they are in their own world. We wonder, when other people are dying, people are brutalized, people are in prisons, even prisons are full now. So I don't feel comfortable.
Thank you. General Mukunja Amooti, you've been a participant in quite a number of elections. At least this is the second shot that you're giving the presidency. Earlier, you were coordinating campaigns for Dr. Kizza Besigye. Has there been any shift in the patterns or in the trends that follow or that run during the campaigns? General Muntu, I hope you can hear me. Is there anything that's making this particular electoral season peculiar in any way compared to others where you've been a participant or a chief coordinator? Lewis, that NUP has arrogantly sustained their campaign to look security, look shabby, and no wonder it is provoking these kinds of skirmishes between you and security. Is there a possibility that you can negotiate a middle ground that would see you comply with the guidelines?
I mean, what guidelines are we not complying with? Or what are we doing that creates this situation that you're talking about?
You're doing rallies in the middle of roads.
What we are asking for is fairness. What we are asking for is justice. If all other presidential candidates are allowed to use the main routes, we want to be allowed to use the main route. If all other presidential candidates can make stopovers and say hello to people at markets for a minute or two, we want to be able to do that. If other presidential candidates are being allowed to hold rallies in the middle of towns, we want to do that. If other presidential candidates or their supporters are allowed to do processions, we want to be able to do that. If other presidential candidates are allowed to address people on radio stations, we want to be able to do that. So all we're asking is equality, is equity, is fairness, is justice. And I felt very bad listening to... Is it NUP alone? What's that?
Is it NUP alone that's denied the privileges?
Of course. I'm asking you, here is a presidential candidate, ask other presidential candidates. And we've been asking this question. And of course, it's what General Muntu said, because of the numbers, because of the support. It is not our crime that we have so many supporters. But if you see where General Museveni is going, either even when he goes there or a day before, the whole processions, I had Mao talking about caravans. Who has organized those caravans more than NRM? They even have these people who move on borders with the yellow helmets, moving around, and they're involved in the chaos in Gulu. You've not seen police come out to ask why they are doing this. But they come and start beating up our people. I had Norbert Mao again trivializing a very, very serious situation, saying that no major things have happened. We have buried more than 5, 6 people as NUP. Tomorrow, a young man in Gulu will be buried who was killed by these thugs. You know, Kalunji Hassan was killed in Kawempe. You had Mesa Chokero killed in Iganga. So it's already a very, very nasty situation. And when you look at each of these circumstances, you clearly see that all that was unavoidable. All these people are dying senselessly because the regime is afraid of the support that we attract. So what we're asking for is fairness. What we're asking for is justice across the board. That NUP should be able to be treated as any other presidential candidate or presidential campaign. President Kyagulanyi should be given equal treatment as any other presidential candidate.
Well, General Mukunja Amooti, as someone who has participated in campaigns before, what is standing out peculiarly in the 2026 election?
Well, really, the elections have been following the same trends. The only problem is the magnitude. Every time General Museveni is on that ballot box, on that ballot paper, what is expected is that the candidates who would pull crowds, because that's the psychology of the regime. They think that the more a person is able to pull crowds, the more popular they are. And therefore the concentration is to ensure that they use methods that would control the building of momentum of crowds. Because if they don't use the methods which they are using to cause fear for people not to continue going on to around the candidate who's putting the crowd. So once they use the method that they use, therefore they control people, they will disperse them. I don't think that that is about to change. I really would be surprised if it changed. And if it changed, then that means that there would have been change of heart in the side of those who are in the regime, that they would have now decided to have a free, fair, and transparent electoral process. So basically, this has nothing to do with even any particular candidate, as I had indicated before. We saw the same tactics being used in 2006, 2011, 2016. Even now, 2021 was different in the sense that there was COVID, and the regime was lucky in that sense that it created an environment which they could have total control in terms of the building up of crowds because of the COVID situation that there was. It wasn't only local, it was also global. But this time around, of course, it's more or less like how it used to be before 2021. And I can tell you that out of us who are the 7 candidates who are organizing to oust General Museveni, even if there are 2 or 3 who would be able to attract crowds or organize crowds, and then they would be seeing a building up of momentum, they would do the same thing. To me, I don't think it has got any specific relationship to a particular candidate. It only has a specific relationship to the crowds. The regime really fears crowds and the building of momentum. That's where all this thing moves around. The moment you remove the issue of crowds, I think they would be comforted by the regime. But yet, when the candidates who are nominated, and depending on the methods that each candidate uses, which is also legitimate and lawful, I think what the regime would do would be simply to see how the police force would be able to not to disperse the crowds, but to see how to manage the processes, to manage traffic and things like that. I think there is a possibility for that to be done. And I would like to believe that if the police was able to sit down with the candidates who use the approach of organizing huge rallies, I think they would come to an understanding on how they can first contain traffic flows or manage traffic flows, and therefore have a win-win situation. If there was that sense that we need to have a free, fair, and transparent electoral process, which unfortunately is not the case.
You've not been disrupted. Doesn't this make you a lame duck candidate who is not attracting the attention of security? How come you have been spared of this violence from security forces? Could it be because you are now looked at as a lame duck candidate who doesn't pose any threat?
One thing I'm sure of, if we focused our effort and resources on building crowds, I would like to believe that exactly what's happening to Nup would happen to us. Let me tell you, if we were to organize crowds and they see 10,000, 20,000 people, there is no doubt, I have no doubt about that in my mind. It's not only myself, any of the 7 candidates would be able to do that. The same tactics would be against that candidate. Because the fear is the building of momentum. If a candidate, for example, goes in one city and they're able to build 10,000 and nothing is done, then the next city it will attract more people to gather around the candidate. now it becomes 20,000, then it becomes 30,000, and then the momentum builds. And therefore, when momentum builds, then it changes. It's in a sense, it shapes public perception that this is a popular candidate, and that's what they about 4 million people. Yet there are 21 million voters. So I wonder why the regime even gets that terrified. Because it means that if the utmost that any candidate can make is about 4 million voters, that would mean that there are 17 million whom no candidate is going to be able to meet. And therefore, there are other channels of influence. For us, that's where we focus most. We believe that if we are able to reach about 15, 16 million people through media, TV, radio, social media.
And the outcry from National Unity Platform is more about fair play, that you are according a lot of latitude to other candidates and hounding out their candidate, Robert Kyagulanyi. What's your take?
Like I said before, whatever you are saying should start from a premise. I do not think you have laid out any premise to justify what you are saying. What needs to be said is that an election does not begin on the day that we have nominations. There is always a build-up. Unless we detoxify the political environment in Uganda, we are going to have these incidents. We are going to have violence. And that is why the country as a whole needs to decide, what sort of democracy do we want? Should elections be an election such that you have a candidate who needs to wear a helmet, and you have a candidate who needs to wear an armored vest, bulletproof? The answer does not lie in TV studios, really. The talking heads may give their analysis. The political leaders may continue blaming each other. But we need to put citizens at the center of elections. It cannot just be about the candidates and the political parties that they represent. I insist that we need to talk about the kind of Uganda we want. We need to sanitize our politics. We need to have a culture of talking to one another. We need to stop ascribing bad faith to our competitors. To me, those are the foundational things that we need to address. These incidents, they can be unpacked. And cameras these days rove wherever there are crowds. We don't have to even do any research about who did what. And the laws are there. So that is something for the Electoral Commission to take over. Do you know that the Electoral Commission can even move the High Court to deregister a political party if that political party is conducting itself in a manner which is totally against the national ethos and against the code of conduct of political parties? But right now, we have not even got any political party being cautioned. But more importantly, each political party should ensure that its members adhere to the code of conduct of political parties. I even doubt whether many political parties teach their members about a code of conduct of political parties. I think we cannot discuss these things without talking about what the law says. These laws are not suggestions. These laws are non-negotiable. These laws apply to everyone. So it is really not necessary for anybody to be accused of giving latitude to one political party or another. As a matter of fact, all the political parties are capable of violence. Even the political parties that we think are very peaceful, they are all capable of violence. But right now, the rivalry is primarily between the NUP and the NRM. And the NUP is very good at crying out loud when something happens. But I do remember in the last elections, there are NUP activists who poured acid on a young lady who was simply wearing a yellow T-shirt of President Museveni. Now, many of those things are not amplified because the NUP knows how to present its case better, I think, and to present itself as the victim. So I hope that we don't reach a point where we have an impasse. The sooner we sit together, the better.
Grand accusation.
It's a very grand accusation.
Towards the National Unity Platform. Could you give more evidence to what you claim that NUP supporters touched an NRM supporter?
They poured acid. That is there. I actually have the details. It was in Kira. In Kira. Now, I want to repeat what I normally say. We have extreme elements in all political parties. And it is the duty of a political party to restrain its extreme elements, because extremists undermine the common good in any organization. Whether an organization has good intentions, if it has extreme elements, so there are extremists in NRM also, and there are also extremists in the NUP. Now, it is important that each political party must deal with extremism. And that's why I base my argument on the law and on the code of conduct.
A case of the violence that ensued in Gulu over the weekend. What was glaring was that security had an upper hand, and then there was an electoral commission that seemed to be hapless in one way or the other. Then there is also the National Resistance Movement, whose supporters donned yellow T-shirts under the ghetto youth establishment. How do you connect the dots here?
I can tell you without any fear of contradiction that those who instigated that violence, those people who were riding motorcycles while wearing yellow, they were in breach of the law. They were in breach of the code of conduct. The ringleaders should be arrested. That lady who went on social media boasting, there are two gentlemen who are wielding machetes. All those should be arrested for the interest of the whole country. The law is very clear. The code of conduct is very clear that no political party should disrupt the activities of another political party. For all intents and purposes, last Saturday, Gulu was clearly for the NUP presidential candidate. And therefore, any other actor who tried to show any sign of activity, either to hold marches or to hold parades, like that border parade that I saw, they were acting illegally. And no one should defend them. It is in the law. So if we don't want to obey the law, let's say so. There was no need. I don't think that it was even called for. That is why that violence was roundly condemned. What is left now is to act.
You talk condemnation. would you boldly condemn the role of the military that seems to be overtaking police and clobbering people left, right, and center?
I have been pleading with police, telling police, please, why don't you have loudspeakers which you use to communicate what you are trying to achieve? Sometime when the police arrives, the onlookers don't even know what the altercations are about. You only see facial expressions and the candidate shouting at the police and the police shouting at the candidate, then a mob gathering. When you are enforcing the law, you must be authoritative. So why don't the police mount loudspeakers on their vehicles and tell the crowds what they are trying to achieve? It is as simple as that. These are not cows. If they are talked to, they will act. If the police can, through a loudspeaker, state clearly, as I've been hearing them saying on TV, yes.
Oh. How come you haven't spoken out on the military openly coming out to campaign for President Museveni, and also their overzealousness, their ruthlessness in clobbering supporters of the opposition?
Like I told you, where we have reached now is not just about speaking out. What we need is action. First and foremost, it is totally untrue that I've not been speaking out. We expect the armed forces to be non-partisan. That is what makes them trusted. There is no need for anybody to repeat that. But there are also procedures of dealing with that. And I think it is possible to do it without necessarily politicizing it. We have got organs. But when you politicize everything, then it falls through the cracks. Then those who are being accused get an avenue. I was in Parliament when one member of Parliament stood up and accused
Be getting back to you. Before we take a very short break, do you observe that things are really getting out of hand? No. That military is openly standing on the podium to campaign for President Museveni?
No. We have 353 direct constituencies. Mentioned for me 10, 50 or 100 constituencies where, first of all, NRM people have fought with rival groups.
No, I'm talking about
No. There are 3 accusations made. You have cited Gulu municipality. He cited the Kazo Kiruhura.
There was Kiruhura.
Kiruhura. Now,
where
you can't say everywhere because they are not there.
Barara.
They are not there in Tororo. They are not there in Tororo.
There were incidents in Uganda.
After there were incidents, the fact that they were not on a large scale does not mean
they have not been there in Panisa where I have been operating the whole of Eastern. I have not seen. 2, when you say the military, I want to believe you are saying probably the UPDF.
Yes.
Also, that's not true because I think it is better to name specific instances and preferably
in
officers.
In Masaka, we have seen soldiers from the fisheries unit.
Listen, and I am coming. Please, I have not seen any instruction, any order, any message from UPDF directing military personnel to campaign for President Yoweri Museveni. However, I have seen, in my case, I have seen only 2 officers, I think. General D. Kolum, I think in his home area in Zombo, I saw once. and this lady, the Lieutenant Colonel, the one in charge of fisheries, obviously those ones.
Plus several others.
And many others.
You are not my eyes.
Do they have a carte blanche to go?
You are not my eyes. I have said I have seen these two.
So
I would prefer that you mention specific.
So what actions have been taken on those people?
Officers. I am not there to follow up on what UPDF does.
Okay.
To this
do you take this in isolation?
Yeah,
considering there are just two.
No, I take that there are isolated instances. There could be cases I have not seen, I have not observed, but I take it as isolated cases, and therefore those officers should be mentioned, brought to book through their command, restrained, and if the offense calls for punishment, it is done so. 2, or rather 3, I'm also aware that in the case of Kyagulanyi, and you see, I don't even want to say NUP, because NUP has other candidates, parliamentary candidates, LC5, whose campaigns, my young brother here told us in the break, he has been campaigning in Kampala. But in
the presidential election.
No, please.
You see, there's a difference. Let me educate you. There's a presidential election and a parliamentary election.
No, you want to talk as if there's only presidential election.
But they are governed by different laws.
As far as I know, there has been engagements directly between security services and Kyagulanyi.
I'm demanding your candidate 3 million.
Kyagulanyi. Now, ask yourself, as far as the few police officers who have interacted with him and I have talked to, they say they have actually been restraining themselves. And that's why I was asking.
First wait, do you know that I'm demanding your candidate 3 million? First wait,
not for my candidate. Don't you know his address?
Because I paid money in the venue when I was in Namisindwa. The SFC refused me to use the venue because your candidate was coming on the Saturday, a day before.
Don't you know the address of my candidate? Please.
And now what you are explaining is not coming out.
But that's why I was asking you. That point in mathematics, we call it point of inflection. Where did the police, that has been restraining itself and engaging Kyagulanyi, at what point has their nerve broken or bent? In my view, I think it is both. The police has been restraining themselves, and I think they are reaching a point where they're saying enough is enough. Probably they shouldn't reach there as a law enforcement. Now, Kyagulanyi, in my view, the first 1 month, it was uneventful. We are turning the last curve, and I think he sees. I don't think he's stupid, but I think he's seeing that if it does not make hyperbole, does not make this eventful, it could pass him, and he thinks that he can salvage his campaigns and probably his electoral fortune by doing
I might need to fact check you here. You can't say the first month was uneventful.
No. I'm saying not to the level where it is.
Look at what happened at Natete.
I know you're a sympathizer of Kyagulanyi.
There you go. That's blackmail now.
No, not blackmail. Is it true you stood on DP ticket?
That's way back. That's way back. You can't let that drag us. You can't drag this here.
Let us review your own moderation of this show.
Can we go for facts? Can we go for the substance of the show?
Yes, there could have been issues, but this inflection where we have now gone to where you yourself, you think we are at a point beyond redemption. Or redemption will be very difficult. And I want to answer that particular one. NRM political party, campaigners, presidential candidate, and the government of NRM will not allow the situation to go beyond redemption. There are many mechanisms for hearing each other that I want to believe the NRM government and the NRM party, which is the dominant anyway, is going to apply to ensure that escalation doesn't go beyond.
I find it rather absurd that you downplay the deaths and the wounds inflicted on Ugandans by premeditated violent officers.
Well, I am saying there could be premeditated. I don't have that evidence. There could be 5. That one we can count the deaths and the injuries we can count, but they are not the overwhelming majority. And I am saying, few as they are, it is disturbing. But your wish, which is NUP's wish, by the way, that the situation goes out of control, so that they appeal to the international media. And I mean, they have already been appealing to the international media. We shall not let that situation escalate beyond imaginable.
We'll take a very short break, but for the record, it's not nobody's wish.
You are not a sympathizer.
And you would never call me a sympathizer in this case, but we are all concerned. We'll be back.
Your position leaning who supported me.
Now you're trying to soothe me after blow. But I need to make a record for you as well. Yes. You were referring to two soldiers, two army officers
those are the
who are openly campaigning. There's another Captain Mugalu.
I don't know that one.
That for all these police officers and all this, we have formally complained to the Electoral Commission about all these military officers you're seeing who are campaigning openly, including Lieutenant General Okidi, who was busy demonizing our president's child and all that. So we've put all these things on record. And every time we have, we are treated unfairly, we make these formal complaints to the Electoral Commission.
What's always their response?
Nothing. Nothing.
Well, let me get to Honorable Mao as I sign you out. Honorable, do you imagine in the coming days the Electoral Commission ought to have a firmer grip onto all stakeholders to have a sane process?
You are asking me about the role of the Electoral Commission, right? In any game, there is always a referee. But the referee is not a law unto himself. In this case of an election, the referee is the Electoral Commission. They are bound by laws. Now, the Electoral Commission does not operate in a vacuum. Many of the hazards that they have to deal with, the contentions, the abuses of the law, the impunity, these are things that our society is still grappling with. Our society is struggling very hard to have some basic consensus about what we should all defend. It starts from the Constitution. If we indeed we say that the people are sovereign, then that means the single most important activity is an election. We are a republic. Not all of us can be invited every time a major decision is supposed to be taken. We delegate that power through, and we elect representatives, and these representatives make the decisions on our behalf through a majority vote. Now, there are things that the Electoral Commission cannot do. The Electoral Commission does not have an army. The Electoral Commission does not have the police. As a matter of fact, the Electoral Commission is supposed, like I said earlier, to be like a referee. A referee does not walk into the football pitch with an army or even a police. So it's easy for us to have our expectations of the Electoral Commission. But I think the legitimate expectation that we should have of the Electoral Commission is to always draw the line very, very firmly. Sometimes they have managed to draw the line. Sometimes they have found it very difficult, like in Kawempe. I remember speaking to the chairman of the Electoral Commission about Kawempe, and he told me that he even considered nullifying the whole process because it was getting out of hand. But then he told himself, so what would we achieve at the end of the day? What we are trying to do is to get people to express themselves through their vote. The Electoral Commission is not a body to be envied now. They are having a lot of problems. But what matters most is for us to de-escalate conflict. I like what OO said, that there is a sense of the dramatic in the NUP candidate. He wants to present himself as a tragic figure, as a hero. And you know, for every hero, there must be a villain. And the only way to create a villain is to create a situation where there can be a victim. So I think there is need for straight talk, not between the Electoral Commission and NUP only, but even between NUP and NRM. Unfortunately, that has been impossible because of the attitude of the NUP. But I do believe that going forward, things are going to get better. I don't agree with those who say things are going to get worse. The Electoral Commission, the police, and the military have to keep picking up the lessons. I'm still optimistic that we are going to cross the finishing line in these elections when we are better.
Oh, in your early days as Minister of Justice and Constitutional Affairs, you were vouching for electoral reforms, warning that elections would be useless if there were no reforms. Has it come to pass that here is another useless election loading?
What I spoke about, of course, were processes. And as you know, a minister of government does not sit in his office and issue a decree to change laws. There are very, very many actors. What we have not been able to do, I believe the will to do it better the next time is always there. But I know that our main emphasis was on biometric verification. And that is going to be there. There were worries about the machines. That has been resolved. Citizens don't even know how much this election is going to cost. Actually, this is going to be the costliest election we have ever had. Now, for that reason, with all that investment, let's really do our best to ensure that we all adhere to the law without exception. And those who breach the law, those who act with impunity, should be called out. I don't think our biggest problem are the laws. The laws that we have are actually superb. They can enable citizens to choose. We can have free and fair elections with the laws that we have. What matters most is mutual goodwill.
Very much for sparing time to speak to us. Honorable General Mugisha Muntu, as I sign you off, do you look at this as an election free and fair that you can write home about?
Whenever we participate in these elections, it is never that we would be expecting them to be free and fair. Our participation normally is to continue building capacity to overwhelm the regime in spite of the unfairness of the system that they do establish to manipulate the process. Also, too, the more you push, the more the regime gets exposed. Because for quite a while, there are people who thought that, oh, the regime was doing quite well. But every time you push them, they expose them as to who they are. So much as they manipulate the electoral process, the participation itself is very, very important in as far as I'm concerned. It's part of a process of struggle. You can imagine if there had been no counter forces since 2001, 2006, 2011, 2016, 2017. The process has been long, but inevitably, I think, I'm not one of those who would think that, oh, getting involved in this kind of election is a waste of time. It is not. As long as we keep on organizing to ensure that we build a better country, we build a better future, to me, it is worth the participation. would the regime try to manipulate the electoral process again? I believe so. But we must also keep on organizing the population, keep on raising their consciousness and their boldness. Because I've seen a number of times, even when the regime wants to manipulate the process, when people change and they change in significant numbers in areas where you found that people have got tired, and about 80% or 80 out of 100 decide to take a stand, normally the regime gets overwhelmed. If that is to happen in, say, 80% of the country, I think in spite of whatever manipulation they do, we would still be able to overwhelm them. So we must keep on applying effort without giving up. It is our country. We must recover it.
What is your projection in terms of percentage if you are to win this election? Well, perhaps I've lost you, but I must really thank you very much, General Mugisha Muntu and Honorable Norbert Mao, for connecting with us virtually to share your perspective. I'll come to you, Honorable Kasivante. If you were to make any prediction under the current circumstances, are you winning or losing already?
No, I'm not losing. Just what I can say, to request Ugandans to trust.
Are you winning?
Yeah, I'm winning, of course.
By what percentage?
By 53, 54, around there. Because now when you look at the rallies that have been having, at least in each district, you may look at me. I make 7 to 8 rallies, and that is the project. Because each rally you can have 2,000, 3,000, and those are the real people in that district. But now my request.
What is your edge over Kyagulanyi? What is your advantage over Robert Kyagulanyi?
My advantage that Honorable Kyagulanyi was a member of parliament. He was part of these other candidates that we are talking about that have been taking the taxpayers' money. He also got a chance of eating the taxpayers' money, which we are talking, and they failed like. How I've heard the Honorable Robert Mao talking about the laws and what of it. He is part of the government and the SDP group, but they have failed to come up with proper laws. Now, when you look at the electoral laws, when you look at the electoral laws that is talking about, how could you have how could you go in elections where a sitting president is always a candidate? We are crying.
Did you say you are at 53%?
Yes.
Isn't that a joke?
That is according to you. But to me, who is in the field, I'm sure that I'm there. But let me first wind up with this. Just to request Ugandans that you trust us, because trust me with your votes. Because these are some of the things that we have to amend. One, we must make sure that we amend the electoral laws. That the sitting president should not be a president when we are going in campaigns. That is one. Then secondly, the military and the police, we are looking at you. You are going to be accountable individually. So make sure that whatever you do, killing Ugandans, for us we are ready to die if you continue with that brutality.
Thank you very much.